Has lack of penalties had added to the confidence of hacker?
Yes.
Has access to cheap data also gave confidence to hacker that added vulnerability to the system?
Definitely, that is the trigger.
AI responsible for the rise of cyberbullying and hacking and stuff like that?
I would say yes. Before AI or attack was happening, they were highly skilled. But with the AI, some of the techniques are available at the hand of you and me also.
The vulnerability imposed to corporates and companies by their own people, how much that has affected?
I would say around 60-70%.
So, Munish, you mentioned that we need to invest in technology as a user, a single user. For me, the piece of technology is my phone. So, which phone do you think, not that I need a model number, but there's always a discussion and choice between Android and iOS. Which one do you think a user can buy out?
Yeah, so I think it boils down to individual perceptions and the money at their disposal. So iOS definitely, because it's a closed one, has upper advantage. But with Android also, again, it boils down to users' behavior. If you are updating your system or the phone on a regular basis, not installing unauthorized applications and having the proper multi-factor authentication or a password, you will be good, right? So at the end, irrespective of the device, it boils down to the people behavior. So I can give you another example. Either you take a Ferrari or you take a Toyota Corolla. It depends on the driver's behavior, the whether it will crash or not.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. Totally. So it's the consumer behavior, what footprints you're leaving, because you're leaving them for somebody else to walk on them. And that's what hackers need, trails. So independent of the phone or the operating system you use, it boils down to your behavior. So if I've said that correctly, Munish, speaking from user to corporations, and what solid tech infra corporations must have? You can say it, or they don't have today. I leave the option to answer it to you, that what they don't have today, which they should build in place, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, and so that they can safeguard at least themselves from getting hacked. Is there any toolkit or
It's
tips?
not about the toolkit, but I think there are different aspects because when for the enterprise environment or the corporation, when we talk about the security, 3 key or the fundamentals aspects are people, process, and technology. Without 3 working in a sync, you can't ensure the holistic security. So let's talk about the first one, technology. There are organizations spending a lot of money in a technology, right? And there are few lagging behind. So their advice to the corporation and enterprises that don't just have tools and technology blindly, because I have seen that certain cases where people are buying license or a new technology, it's a name and it's lying over there. It won't work in silos. The first thing is that it has to start with the process part of it. It means you have to have a strategy, right? This is your future state for the next 2 years, depending on the business. This is going to be the future architecture. Let's have the strategy right. According to that strategy, or maybe you do a gap assessment of your existing environment, where you stand, what is your current security state and where you want it to be. Based on that, invest into technology, latest technology, basic controls, everything, which sometimes doesn't happen. It doesn't matter how much money you are pouring into the system, but it has to work in sync.
It has to work in sync.
Leverage that technology. One example, basic firewall, all right? It doesn't matter if you have a firewall or not in the organization. What it boils down to, how you are leveraging that firewalls to create rules that what is allowed and what is not allowed, what is my policy. So this is how technology has to be used. Second thing is that process. Why I'm highlighting on that? Because in absence of a governance, risk and compliance or a process, you might have a technology, but you don't know how in sync we have to leverage, because what happens then, you will be relying on an individual in your organization. There's a
Yes.
one guy managing that thing very good because of his own expertise. Tomorrow that guy leave, you don't have a documentation, you don't have the best practices policy how to manage it. Instead of relying on an individual, make sure that you have a process policies. Guys, as an organization, we regard cybersecurity at highest level. These are the process and policies has to be followed, every individual. Third thing, and which I think even in India and across the globe, I've seen that even a big corporations are the failing
Absolutely. We have example of Google, Yahoo, yeah.
because of the people.
Right.
And most of the time, attacks are happening because of insider, some kind of issues and something. And they are the one hard to track and identify how it has happened. It might be intentional or
This is very
unintentional.
interesting.
It might be intentional or unintentional. And typically, I think if I were to say today, typical incident to identify, takes around 278 days. It's not that easy that something compromise has happened. You will identify something. It might be that attack is happening in your organization from last 2 years.
And you have no
They are
whiff
stealing
of
all the
it.
information. It's sometimes that's what I'm saying. So people are the weakest link in any attack. You will see, most of the time, whether it's a phishing attack, whether it's a social engineering attack. So that's why the organization has to invest into people, awareness, training, and make sure that they know how to, when to report certain incidents. Organizations are doing it to certain extent, but I think we have to
There's a question on
stress
that.
on more on that.
There's a question on that which I'll take prepone it now. It will be the continuous one. Okay, after you are hacked, what is your next step? Where do you report?
Yeah. So there are different aspects. So one is that depending on the geo that you operate into. So for example, if you are operating from India, you have to report the compromise, that information or attack to certain. Then it boils down to the kind of industry you operate into. So for example, you are into stock market or financial house, you have to update to SEBI and all
Right.
others, right?
Okay.
You have to update your investors and everyone, right? And then you have to make sure that you also update even to the all your customer and user. You have to notify on your website that this has happened, compromise has happened, whatever might be the reason. Internal investigation is going on, or now we are trying to do the digital forensic or identify the root cause for it. That damage has been contained and this workaround has been placed, and this is what we are going to ensure that information is secured and enough control is there. Why it is vital is that it can break or make any organization.
Oh, yes. In fact,
Right. So, for example, if there's a company dealing in financials or one in a public listed company, there is a compromise of information. The brand reputation go for a toss, but at the same time, the impact you're gonna see is their market valuation. I have seen the companies, market valuation eroding 30, 40, even in a 50%, just like that.
my God.
So that's why cybersecurity is a very, very vital topic for any organization. They can't afford it. They have to ensure their people, process, technology is in place. And I think I forgot to highlight one thing when I was talking about the user awareness. When organizations talks about the security awareness or the training for an employee, we tend to start with the junior people, software engineer, managers, and all that. I think we should start with the board and the C-level people, and there is a reason for it, because they are the one have the most sensitive information available to them or their devices. And most of the time, I've seen in industry they are not under the umbrella of having a security awareness. So it's much better for any organization, make sure that your board, your C-level people are completely aware about the risks and the consequences of not following the best practice, because then it will be top bottom approach and it will
Yes.
be more effective.
More effective. No, perfect. I think I'm going to pick up that point on the valuation you mentioned, that what the valuations of the company are at stake. I see a similar um, uh, the similar thing exists in the private equity and venture funds space as well, because they invest in company, they give growth capital, they give them early seed capital, and of course most of the venture funds and private equity, our intention is to help the companies grow. There's a lot riding on them
Yeah.
in terms of investments and basis of certain promises and matrices. The startup are supposed to perform, and so that they are ready for the next round and subsequently. But the bigger game happens when the startup, like I'll take an example of e-commerce, like a startup who has received good funding, investors have shown confidence, it raises first round, second round, it becomes a larger participant in the e-commerce business, and then the larger investors comes in. It's a valuation, opportunity,
Yep.
and the market segment the startup is. What happens in this space, and what is your advice to these PE VC? Because if valuation is everything, tomorrow if the startup gets hacked, am I right that this could lead to larger sabotaging of valuation for these investors?
Definitely, and I think a very vital point. So, because we have to understand the fundamentals, the way private equity works, right? They invest into any organization, but why they invest it? Because their investor, they want to show the result as the return. Maybe sometimes they have a 3-year or 5-year maximum lock-in period. They invest into some organization, startup or something. They wanted to exit with a higher valuation. Now imagine a scenario. You invested into some startup or the new company, $500 million today, right? With the assumption that in the next 3 years the business is booming and something, our $500 million valuation is going to be a $2 billion, right? Which is a return to your investors and your partners. Imagine a scenario if that startup, and you also not looked into it, what is their cyber posture? And let me put it, the the startup is in retail, online retail or something, is getting hacked. Their information is getting compromised because they were not following the cybersecurity hygiene. They were not investing into that, and their cyber posture was very bad. In that scenario, if that company is going to get hacked, the startup we are talking about, your valuation, you might have put $500 million. Yeah, that might not be remain $100 million, because that startup, the brand reputation go for a
Absolutely,
toast.
yeah.
Their customer confidence will be there also. So it means that the money
Absolutely.
that spend is going for a toss. So it's a very important for a PE investor firms these days, irrespective of the industry, be it a retail industry, be it e-commerce, or be you wanted to invest into mining metal something. Check for that how serious the management of that organization when it comes to cybersecurity initiative. What is their cyber posture, and what is their long term, let's say next 3 years strategy, to make sure that they have cyber programs in place.
Right. No, I think that this opens a very different dialogue and discussion for companies to have with their investors, and investors like venture funds or private equity to have with their portfolio companies. कि all this is good, तुम्हारा cyber proof plan कहाँ है?
Precisely.
Right. And which is where you step in and you kind of validate these things, which is, I think, becoming very, very important here. That brings me to an interesting question. Because हमारी एक आदत हो जाती है हर चीज़ बैलेंस शीट में देखने की.
Yeah.
और ये साइबर वनरेबिलिटी एक tangible भी है और एक intangible भी है.
Yeah.
We know it will impact us for the, if I'm a listed company, it will impact me for my shareholders, 30% correction, 10% correction, I don't know. But there's a larger intangible loss that you said about reputation.
Precisely.
Right? Which you can't measure. Once gone, it's out, right? So, balance sheet में, do you recommend or do you see that future में एक item आएगा, line item, जिसमें hackers allowance या hackers provision होगा, hacking provision, अगर if we don't get our act right?
So what I can see that, and I think that is needed. So as of now in balance sheet, what generally we put it is that IT budget, right? Or in certain cases, very mature, you put it like cyber insurance also. What it means, the cyber insurance, like for example, they have a 200 million cyber insurance. If any attack will happen, they're covered.
Right.
That shows their maturity,
Right.
that they know their risk and they have a certain appetite, and based on that, they have cyber insurance. However, I think it's good to have, and a very vital point, that maybe under that IT budget allocation, there is a specific header for a cyber security initiatives or cyber security budget. Maybe it's just the 0.02 of your thumb,
Yeah.
but that shows the maturity of the board, of the organization, that they take cyber security very seriously.
Right.
So
right.
it means information. So it will work two way. It will instill investor confidence. It will, if you're a public listed company, the end users, and also you will be complying to the regulatory requirements or the space that you are operating in.
Yeah, because this was just a hypothetical assumption that shouldn't
No,
balance sheets have provisions for.
It must have, or if it's not in the main, next year it can go. As an organization, these are the cybersecurity initiatives we have done last 2 quarters or 1 quarter, and this is what our vision.
Right. And we come to know that what kind of a amount is getting provisioned for this, so that even government has access or has capability to contribute in this framework, help these companies with better policies and in our architecture that we are building. I think a lot can be done when we start rolling the ball in that direction. Ki collectively Indian corporates or institutions proactively have taken provisioning of hacking or whatever can happen and go wrong tomorrow.
Yep.
So not always prepared to pay for a ransom,
Yep.
but so that there is some barometer on an index of the spending to be done for the
Yeah.
technology companies to fill up the gap.
So, yep. And I think something very interesting on my mind. So, because we keep talking about the banks, we're talking about the manufacturing companies or something. So, if you're aware about the last year's attack on Caesar Palace and MGM Casino in Vegas,
No,
they
this
are
I
not.
missed.
They are not a.
ये last हुआ है?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So last year it has happened that MGM and Caesar, that casinos were
Casino को ही hack कर लिया.
compromised.
अच्छा, अच्छा.
So if it can happen there, and because the system was not available, people were not able to play, and they have to have a around $100 or $200 million loss. It can happen anywhere and everywhere, so no one is protected out of it.
So the next billionaire list 10 years down the line would have 10 hackers as a top 10.
No, it might
So
not.
like hackers will go happily to banks.
So it might not be hackers, but it can be, the technology stalwarts or the technology companies who might be helping the organization to withstand the challenge, right?
Okay.
And there are very good companies which has shown a tremendous growth in last 2-3 years. For example, Zscaler, Palo Alto, you take name, their valuation is multiple times, right? And
Right. So Munish, this is where we check how much system is vulnerable because of various aspects that we identified. And of course, Jamtara contributed a lot to this content. But this is really serious that and someone like with your expertise can help us identify whether this is a vulnerable situation and it has led to vulnerability in the system. Let's see if the block of dominoes fall. So the first thing is first, do you think telecoms competition styling, sales pressure on the ground level of sales folks added vulnerability to the space of hacking?
I would say yes before December 2023. And I have answer for that why.
Will you remove the block first? Tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, one block down.
So that led to it because there was a pressure on our sales to sell SIMs and everything. Proper validation was not happening that whether the user is the right I'm selling. Now, Government of India in December 2023, just 2 months back, created a new Telecommunication 2023 Act, which has a cybersecurity enforcement controls, which every telecom operator has to follow.
Wow.
It means that you are giving SIM to somebody. It has to be only after biometric validation via Aadhaar. Otherwise, you can't give SIM to anyone. Second thing is that in that Telecommunication Act also, the government is creating certain identifiers and rest of the things also. So what it means that it's a much easy to track And also, you might have seen that the virtual SDNs or virtual phones are being used to hack or to do some fraudulent activities. And you might have seen that the calls are coming from Dubai numbers and all that. So there are also provisions for that. So government of India is very serious about that. I'm sure in telecommunication sector there will be impact on organizations. And from an operator perspective, also do's and don'ts are clear, because otherwise there is a huge penalty and 3 years of imprisonment already mentioned into it.
Fantastic. I think government is doing its best in safeguarding
Precisely.
the users and putting this framework, the tight framework in place with super penalties.
Precisely. Yep.
That's my next question. That has lack of penalties had added to the confidence of hackers?
Yes. So I have to take it here.
Right.
So lack of penalties added to the
Lack of fear bol lijiye, matlab,
yeah, lack of fear, and also more than the hacker, because the hacker will always do that. They have certain financial motives or other motives. They are the thing is, the lack of penalty result in the organizations are not following the right procedures or doing what they are supposed to do. Once it's a penalty, it's a mandatory. They have no option. They have to follow that.
Right. Now, this is interesting because because you mentioned about and brought to our attention that how Government of India is involved in strengthening that space exactly. So far the lack of fear has अगर डर ही नहीं है तो कुछ भी कर सकते हैं हमारी बात.
Precisely. This is a struggle between the lack of, not a lack of, I would say lack of fear, and there's a greed. So that's what
Fear and
leading
greed.
to the challenges and the attacks, what is happening.
Right.
So yeah.
So fear पे आपने एक निकाला था, अभी greed पे निकालो है. Because
Here we go.
lack of education or the lack of awareness, which probably will continue, I don't know, is adding to the vulnerabilities of the system.
I would say no, because when you look at the kind of awareness campaigns being run by state governments, government of India on all the channels, and by the various entity, be it banks. Every time you in India itself, you on your radio there is a campaigns, don't share your OTP with anyone. Every cigarette packet has that warning, the smoking is injurious to health. People still do that. So it's going to be never ending story. Definitely the government or the organization can have a more interactive campaigns, but at the end of the day it boils down to you and me individuals. If the bank is sending some information, they keep saying it, we have to give respect to it, and we have to follow the hygiene.
No, perfect. So I get why didn't you remove it? That it's not the lack of education. Is cheap smartphones responsible? Shouldn't they be just out of the shelves?
Yes. So shall I remove it? So I think cheap smartphones are responsible. I think Government of India has taken certain steps in last couple of years, because there was dumping of a lot of smart Chinese phones.
Yes.
Right. So it was very difficult to validate and track those phones. So those have been banned. Right. So definitely, the quality comes with the price tag. Right. So if something like a very cheap phone, it might not have the past or forget the hardware, but the software, anyway, they are using Android, but it depends, how logged on that Android is. So to a certain extent, we don't have that Chinese phone problem anymore, but still again users has to ensure that when they're buying something, it's much better to invest once than doing it again and again and having major losses. Right.
Has cheap data, access to cheap data, also gave confidence to hacker that added vulnerability to the system?
Oh, definitely that is the trigger. So instead of
Cheap data.
instead of, I would say instead of a cheap data, I would say the availability of the data in absence of a stringent controls around it, because entities, be it called government, semi-government, something, have not think about it, not in India but globally also. So that's alluring somebody to attack me or something, because it's easy. And what is happening with the new technology innovation, you don't have to be a full-fledged hacker. Sometimes the script kiddies with little information available, and I think AI is adding fuel to the fire. They just doing it for the fun and able to do that.
You answer the next question for me. Is AI responsible for the rise of, cyberbullying and hacking and stuff like that? Cyber hacking.
I would
for
say
them.
yes,
Okay.
because before AI, when any hacker or attack was happening, they were highly skilled, knowledge. But with the AI, some of the algorithms or some of the techniques are available at the hand of you and me also. The people are creating code via ChatGPT or other AI tools. So definitely
AI is added to the vulnerabilities.
added to that where unintentionally or for fun things are happening.
तो एक निकाल दो फिर ब्लॉग आप बचा रहे हो उसको मुझे मालूम है but I'm just okay. Rise of micro lending apps and lack of supervision by the companies and who is creating the replicas and stuff, एक ई का फर्क होता है या एक डॉट का फर्क होता है और उसमें पूरी गेम ऑन हो जाती है हैकर्स की. Do you think the micro lending apps or unregulated space of micro lending, copying of micro lending has also added vulnerability to in this space?
So I think yes and no. There is a reason, because when we micro lending apps problem, which is not regulated, it's a more than cybersecurity. It's the governance problem or the financial governance problem. Because that's where most of the time we are seeing in the news the scams are happening, chit fund scam and those kind of things. So it's more from that. They are not adding to the cybersecurity, but more of financial governance problem.
Okay, great. Okay. How responsible has been this casual approach of users on sharing Aadhaar data? Has that made the system vulnerable? To what extent?
So that has not made the system vulnerable. The system is strong enough.
The casualness of users.
Yeah. So but the thing is that with that, the users are putting themselves at the risk. So, for example, what is happening? Even Aadhaar, UID, keep sending mails. Don't share your Aadhaar with anyone. This is your identity. And even if you have to share somewhere, there is a provision that you can have the masked Aadhaar card, just the last 4 digits to validate your identity. But people are still doing that. So, for example, sometimes we have to go to a hotel or we are booking something, and the guy is saying, sir, send me Aadhaar copy on a WhatsApp. We keep doing that, and that has all our details. So we have to get rid of this casual approach about the identity, right?
So the casual approach by the user is something that has added vulnerability even at the user level.
Yeah.
So एक block निकलना बनता है.
No.
You're really taking it head on. Wow. Okay. So we are coming to the institution side, okay? Because users, तो institutions में भी हैं, ground level zero, ground level, staff, and mid level, as you rightly explained. The question is that the vulnerability imposed to corporates and companies by their own people, how much that has affected the
I would say to huge extent, and I would say around 60-70%, and there is a reason to it. Because I'm not saying intentional, whether intentional or unintentional, most of the time the attacks are originating from inside. Because somebody's mistake, they forget to log in the system or forget to mask something, and that is difficult to track. It takes much more time to track attacks that originate from inside than the coming from outside. Because most of the time our approach is that let's see, who is coming from outside and protect ourselves. But the major problem is that within the system itself, which boils down to that our employees, whether they're working in a financial business unit or even our logistic courier department, security, everybody has to have at least some kind of a basic cyber awareness or cyber hygiene, so that they should not be the agent of a hacker or opening a hole into the security of the system.
Right, उस पे आपने block नहीं निकाला, but आप निकाल
Yeah,
सकते हो.
I'm
कुछ
just
निकाल
looking
ऊपर.
which one to.
Yes, was the vulnerabilities within the system caused by its own staff.
Yes.
Is something, right? And no, I think this is great. The Dominos is still standing strong. Is there something that you think I have missed that that does add vulnerabilities to the user or corporation, but I missed that question? Is there something that you would like to remove it for the blog?
No, so I think data privacy
Data privacy.
have
Right?
been missed because in today's context, that is very, very important because when we keep saying about the user awareness and all these initiatives, user has to aware about their data. The government is, or MD, people are keep saying, your identity. So there is a lot of work is happening. A lot of work is going to happen because just a few months back we had in India new digital personal data protection act, which shows that the government of India's commitment and assurance to ensure that in this geo individuals data is secured, and without their consent no one can use that information. So it boils down to that user awareness also, that you have to select which data information you wanted to give it to whom. Don't just blindly give information because that's your information, and that can work as the indicator or certain points which hackers or the bad guys can leverage to stitch together a story to compromise your information.
Well said. In fact, but as we can see that the Jenga is still standing tall, it's not the game over.
Yeah.
But what I love the way government has put some reinforcing steps, small things, but matters a lot. That when my CA is doing my filing and it is pulling out any data from an IT portal, I get a message
Precisely.
that someone has extracted Aadhaar. Can this outstanding surveillance and commitment to the data can be replicated for by others in the corporate space, the private space, right? I believe that's where your biggest agenda would be,
Yeah,
to
so,
sanitize the corporates and investors and stuff.
Oh, I think the enterprise world, and especially it again boils down to the business, B2B or B2C scenario. In a B2C, business to consumer, I think to certain extent it is already happening. And when it boils down to PIE data or personal identifier information, I think after this DPDP bill, it will be mandatory for everyone. So what's going to happen because of that bill is that if any organization is not ensuring the proper safeguard for data privacy, they are liable to 250 to 500 crore penalties. That is one thing. And then government has clear charted out these are the things that has to be done. It means no one can use Jyoti's information if you are not providing a consent to it. And you have a authority to revoke your consent anytime. It means today you are saying, use my information. Tomorrow you don't want it to. You have to revoke the consent, and they have to ensure that your information is getting removed from their system.
One is the data, as you mentioned. The other question that comes very off late, definitely because of the misuse of the generative AI, deep fakes and morphing. What happens to my pictures or users' pictures which are there? They are my data too.
Yeah.
So how can be deep fake menace be handled in that
So
case?
I think on to that, the government of India is working with these providers and to regulate that, because I think one of the major Bollywood controversies
Yes.
happened last month. So the government of India is already charting out, the whether the technology has to use or not and how to regulate that. That is one thing. Second thing is that you have to ensure that your pictures are not in just like that in a public domain. That will add for the deflake or anyone to misuse that. So, for example, you have a Facebook profile, you ensure that you are logged in. All your information, only your family, friends who have the access to it. It should not be you have a public profile and everything going for a dinner with my dog and everything, because that, even for a deflake, they have to have your
Yes.
facial expressions and different things. Right? It boils down to different indicators.
Right. So, Yeah, that's true. But again, I think you're making a very important, consistent point that it is users' own habits, right?
Precisely, because
Yeah.
so I think I have used it before. So
Yeah.
let's assume a scenario of 200 years back. You can build a big castle, huge thick wall, army is there, everything is there, but then there's a gate in between, which is entry and exit point, right? And gate is closed, and the guy who's manning that gate, if he's not aware, properly able to control, no one need to invade that castle itself. That is the easiest entry point through that guy. Open the gate, go inside. It boils down to that. Or forget the guy is not there. There is a lock that has to protect from that gate. It's not strong enough. So nobody need to penetrate that 9-meter thick wall. They just have to penetrate that lock. Which is
Absolutely.
easy. So it's about identifying the weakest link in that whole scheme of things. So that's what I'm saying. When it comes to enforcement of a control following, humans are that most of the time are the weakest link.
Weakest link. We are the weakest link, and we are responsible for all that goes around.
Yeah, it can.
And
So it can be
totally.
human error. So you have seen so many cases in news. Be it planes crash or something. Most of the time, you will realize, human error.
Your one-word answer for next war is gonna be on water or cyber. It will be a cyber war.
No, so if you would have asked this question maybe 10 years back, or my answer would be water.
Yeah.
Because we have grown up hearing this.
Yeah.
Next war will be on water. But now, next war might happen on a water, but that's going to happen in 2060 or 2070, after 30, 40 years. The next war or a major one is going to be cyber warfare, and that might happen after 5 years.
Right.
So that's what
It's
I'm
already
saying.
happening. It's like a dress rehearsal happening in different parts.
Precisely. The water war is far away. The next major challenge to the humanity is cyber warfare. And that might happen in the next 5 years or 10 years. The reason why I'm saying so, the kind of environment we are living in today is very hostile. We have instability in the Middle East. What is happening over there? We have a war happening in Ukraine. We have a certain concerns, geopolitical one in South America and all that. So that is what leading to the hostile environment. And I think the next war is going to be cyber warfare. Why I'm saying so? I won't name a country, but you know that one of the major economy or the countries already started doing that through state-sponsored terrorism or this hacking attempt. So the thing is that these with this AI and all that or sponsored hacking, it will be very easy to cripple any country because the current country is growing how GDP, economy, their national critical infrastructure. So, for example, if somebody trying to attack my grid, which is providing a power supply, my whole country will be
Absolutely.
ruined even for 2 days.
And this has happened, you mentioned. This has happened in the past. Yeah.
Precisely, this is happening. So I have a vital, for example, nuclear installations or a power plant that can be crippled because the reason is that this is the next war going to happen, where you are immobilizing the country and the critical infrastructure, and then you will be
You
back.
can literally bring the country
Precisely,
at a standstill with the cyber.
And this
cyber
is
attack,
what is happening already at a very small scale with the ransomware. It
Right.
means because of the ransomware, they blocked your system and crippled your day-to-day work. You can't do that. That's what happened in AIMS, or you take example of any ransomware attack. It means user is not able to access the right information which they are supposed to. Patient is not going to take the services of a doctor and a patient, and doctors are not going to deliver. So at a much larger scale, when we look at the geopolitical environment or a country to country level, imagine the kind of scale it will
Right.
happen. So next war is going to be definitely cyber warfare.
Wow.
And
You made that very scaringly clear.
I'm,
gotta
I'm
watch out
more,
for.
more than 100% clear.
Right.
And I think AI is going to make it more worse.
Yeah, right. In fact, that's really scares me. The little have started to learn and understand that what are we playing with? The fire, the same composition of fire can heat your food and give you food on the table. The same fire can burn you down.
Precisely.
And which is what cyber folks in cybersecurity and vigilance are doing. They're using AI and other aspects of technology as well. And so are the hackers, the menace are handling AI for doing the worst things. Only time will tell how this play out really happens. But one thing is pretty clear, and likes of him, they don't sleep. They work 24/7 because cyber vigilance requires them to do it. Users don't give them any time for them to take a break because users are doing everything possible to make the dominoes fall. I'm glad that we have government that is not missing any points or any developments in this area. I'm super excited for the futures of users if provided they hold the bargain at their end of being aware, being vigilant with their data. And yes, infrastructure, regulations, administration, public-private partnership will help you, give you the framework to feel secure. But what goes in through your thumb into your phones is something for you need to decide. Hacking is not a great experience. I haven't been hacked yet, but touch wood. But as Munish said, sabka number aayega. So it's not if, it's when. So if you are determined to prove him wrong, you need to change your user behavior. And so will I. Thank you, Munish. Questions are endless. The list will only go up. I will see you again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Munish,
thanks
for
for having
joining.
me. Yep.
Great. One thing which I want you to tell about to Gen Zs and high intense user for social media, your 30-second message to caution the listeners.
30 seconds is adopt cyber hygiene. Be it your cell phone, be it your browser, you have to be very cautious what you're accessing and what you're accepting as well. For example, cookies. And there are no free lunches in this world. If something seems to be very, interesting, you have one this or a 80% discount, that might not be true. You need to validate it. So that's what I ensure and make sure that, from a phone perspective, I have already mentioned, don't use autofill, have proper passwords. It will work as a deterrent because, for example, if my password is very simple, it will take hacker very less time to break in. But if your password is a huge multi-factor authentication, it will work as a deterrent.
Right. So let's put a lot of deterrents in the way
Precisely.
of hacking. And thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.